E rere kau mai te awa, mai e takahui maunga ki Tangaroa, ko wau te awa, ko te awa, ko wau. The river flows from the mountain to the sea. I am the river, and the river is me.
Section 12, the river is an indivisible and living whole, incorporating all its physical and metaphysical elements.
The New Zealand Parliament has passed a bill recognizing the Whanganui River as a living entity to the same legal rights as a person.
Tribes in the area fought with the government for recognition of its relationship with the river since the 1870s. The Whanganui River will be granted its own legal identity as an individual.
I mean, we know there were injustices done. You can't put the clock back. You've got to move forward and apply modern-day solutions to what happened before.
We don't do revolutions. Revolutions generally don't work.
In my time, I've seen when this city of 40,000 plus people was putting their sewage directly into the river. That's what I grew up with. Somebody has to be responsible, and there is certainly something bigger that this country's psyche hasn't come to grips with.
I think perhaps that you should say a few words in the New Zealand language. It would be appropriate, Governor. Nothing complicated.
What does it mean?
6 February 1840, Maori and the Crown signed what was known as the Treaty of Waitangi. It's the opposite of the Declaration of Independence in the United States. Under that treaty, the Maori recognised the sovereignty of the British Crown, became British subjects with exactly the same rights as an Englishman had in terms of the rule of law.
Order. Again, the Mayor. Order. Honourable Chris Finlayson.
I know that the Right Honourable Mr Peters doesn't like treaty settlements because he lives in a negative, backward world, dreams of a country that never was and never could be, doomed to ask questions and do nothing more, has nothing to contribute, unlike our great Prime Minister.
Bigger. Order.
What I was supposed to do on behalf of the government was negotiate a settlement between the state and the Indigenous people of New Zealand of the Whanganui River claims. This is a river where there have been lots of debates over who owns the bed of the river, what needs to be done to improve the status of the river or the condition of the river. One of the highlights of my time was getting in a jet boat and going down the river with some of the leaders of the Whanganui River. The jet boat was going about 30 knots and the rain was coming at me at about 30 knots, so it wasn't the most enjoyable experience from a touristic point of view, but I sure learned a lot.
Maybe you connected with it a little bit there.
I don't know, I certainly was connecting with the rain.
All the river was theirs. Its bush, its birds and fish, its deep, refreshing waters. For centuries, the tribes of Aotea daydreamed on its waters, studying every leaf and fern, and weaving legends around the whirlpools and rapids of the enchanted river.
When you carry the weight of your ancestors, It's not an easy position to be in. In one sense, you feel them supporting you, the old people, those who have gone on. In the other sense, sometimes you can carry the heaviness of it. The river, or how we would refer to it, the awa tupua, we see it as a living entity that carries our ancestors, that carries their memories. It's a metaphor for our history. We're very much connected physically, spiritually, and even our philosophies very much come from being a people of the river. Right?
In the metaphor of the iron and the clay, who is the iron and who is the clay?
Iron is a way of thinking or a mentality that may be disconnected from the earth. Iron could be seen as that which is introduced, as the fences that divided the land, whereas clay represents the earth. And sometimes we see this antagonism, this tension, the iron, as it was introduced, clashing with te uku, the clay. Two worldviews colliding, eh?
Sheltered valleys and rising slopes above the river proved ideal for stock. The ancient hunting and cultivating grounds of the Maori disappeared. And over their old canoe routes travel the wool-laden steamers. And to the bush valleys come tourists from other lands.
Lots of people say, oh, Wanganui, there's nothing there, because they drive through it, or what the hell do they expect? Stop and look around, yeah. It's a bit of a secret, don't tell everybody.
What's your title?
Master.
Master of what?
The vessel.
Oh. Have you heard that the river has been granted the rights of personhood?
You can never say it's a person, because that'll just confuse people. It's not a person, but it is a living entity. It has life. It can be rough, turbulent and dirty, or it can be clear and sweet and calm and gentle. There's all the attributes of a person, but to go any further than that, you just confuse people. There you go, that's the gospel according to Skipper Dawn.
Someone's gonna find a loophole though, right? We live in a litigious society in the United States. A lot of people will find reasons to sue a river if they have the ability to do so. If the river flooded this museum, would you consider suing it?
No, it has flooded this museum. In 2015, this whole museum was flooded right almost up to this bench here.
No desire to sue the river?
No.
Okay, so what if the river decided it didn't want the riverboat on it anymore?
I'd be heartbroken. I find my connection to the river is the riverboat. That's what I'm passionate about.
It's a coal-burning ship?
It is, yes.
That must be rare.
There's only 2 or 3 coal-burning commercial ships in New Zealand, and this is one of them. Yes, she's dirty, she belches out smoke, but all the cars that use the road every day would belch out an awful lot more pollution than we do.
There's no feeling of threat there. There's no feeling that this could go away or...
Well, hopefully not. I think common sense should prevail, but that's something that seems to have gone out the window these days, common sense. I mean, we know there were injustices done, but successive governments, I think, have made as much effort as they can by redressing that. You can't put the clock back. You've got to move forward and apply modern day solutions to what happened before.
What we've done here is give the river its own legal identity, so it's a legal person. It's not a human person, it's a legal person.
The Wanganui River will soon have 2 jointly appointed human representatives, one nominated by the Crown and one by Wanganui iwi.
Former Minister Dame Tariana Turia and educator Turama Hawera will act as the human face of the river to ensure its rights are protected.
Obviously, the river itself wouldn't go into court. It is represented by a number of people. The key thing is the legislation settles all the historical claims that had been brought against the Crown going back over 100 years.
When we were negotiating with the Crown, we said that we need to find an approximation at law to how we view and hold this river. And so legal personhood was the closest approximation we could find. We knew that saying that the river was both physical and spiritual wasn't going to be enough. We needed to define what that is.
Section 12, the recognition of the river is an indivisible and living whole, incorporating all its physical and metaphysical elements. And so people may well look at that and say, what planet are these New Zealanders living on?
The river begins high in the mountains, but to the Maori people, it begins in the mists that swirl around the peaks and along the valleys. It begins in the mists in the sky above.
The fact of the matter is you can't divide a river up into the bed, the water column, and the air above the river. I think you can get hung up on these Western concepts of ownership.
Okay, so the river's water comes from the rain, and the rain falls through farmland, city streets, through a lot of different areas. Because legally the river is now indivisible, I'd imagine that everything that water touches along the way might eventually gain the same personhood.
Yes, well, I suppose that's right. Insofar as the water is part of this indivisible entity, it will flow in and flow out. Yeah.
So then the larger idea would be that all of nature, in some way or another, gets spoken for.
When you think about it, why not?
Where does the river go when it rushes into the sea? It hasn't got a right bank, it hasn't got a left bank, it's not fresh water, it's not moving in one direction. That's our conception of what a river is. So when it goes into the ocean, where's it gone?
In Michigan, people have a lot of lead in the water, which means that literally that poisoned water is now that poisoned them. You don't have to get very metaphysical here. You are the river, right? We are all in some way or another.
Well, we're all interconnected with nature, yeah.
If the river was to pass, if the river was to die, well, we would die also.
Most of us just assume our water is safe to drink, not the citizens of Flint, Michigan.
I'm already dying from my health issues, but y'all gonna kill me even quicker.
Most Americans take for granted that they have clean water to drink.
Who doesn't want clean air or clean water? I'd like to think every American does.
This is with respect to the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline.
The pipeline runs adjacent to the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, destroying sacred sites and could pollute the Missouri River, a clean water source for millions.
Is the water crisis a crime scene?
It is. It absolutely is a crime scene. And there are victims. There are absolute victims, and there are villains.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Trump, any comment to the Standing Rock community, the protesters out there?
Thank you, Press.
We're good. Thank you.
If anything, the biggest threat to this river are the politicians. And they might be American politicians, they might be from some other country.
The locals seem to laugh it off when we talk to them about it, the legislation. One of them didn't think that it had actual teeth.
That's the way things are. We don't do revolutions. Revolutions generally don't work, but incrementalism, I think, in this kind of area does.
Not having heard a bell, but looking at the clock, I know my time is almost over. So can I thank all iwi representatives for being here today and finish with the great Whakatoki. The great river flows from the mountains to the sea. We now have an arrangement which will be an enduring arrangement and is the start of something very, very special. I commend the bill to the House.
One thing I do know about politics is you get a chance to dance across the stage, but when the curtain comes down, that's it. How often in modern politics do people get a second chance? So while you're there, you've got to get on with it and go as fast as you can.
It wasn't the politicians that pushed the Berlin Wall over, it was the people. And the people can make this change.
God's gonna trouble. God's gonna trouble the